So, let's talk about one of the oldest and, let's be honest, most controversial practices in human history, the death penalty. It's this incredible story of justice, fear, and power, a sentence from which there is absolutely no coming back.
And that really gets to the core of it, doesn't it? That single, haunting question. A question that becomes painfully, horribly real when the system gets it wrong. And it did, in the tragic case of a man named Jack Mario.
Okay, picture this. It's 1872 in Nebraska. Jack Marion's friend, Cameron, just vanishes. And believe it or not, it's Marion's own family who points the finger at him. A year later, a body turns up, and they misidentify it as Cameron. Marion, probably terrified, flees, which of course only makes him look more guilty. He's eventually caught, and in 1887 he's executed, swearing up and down that he was innocent. But that's not even the end of the story. 4 years after he was hanged, Marion's uncle finds Cameron, alive and well, living in Mexico. He had just taken off and had no idea that his friend had been put to death for a murder that literally never happened.
Jack Marion's story is a modern tragedy, for sure, but the whole idea of state-sanctioned death goes back thousands of years. So to really get a handle on where we are now, we've got to go way, way back, to the very first written laws.
The earliest legal code we know of, the Code of Ur-Nammu, had just 3 capital crimes. Pretty straightforward: murder, robbery, and adultery. But then, flash forward just a few centuries, and you get the famous Code of Hammurabi, which cranked that number all the way up to 31. Now, some of these make sense, right? Murder, theft, you get it. But some are, well, they're pretty surprising. I mean, get this. You could be executed for accusing someone of murder without any proof, for lying in a trial, or even for messing with the scales at the market. The idea was crystal clear: make the punishment so incredibly severe that fear alone would keep everyone in line.
Hammurabi's code ran on a principle we now call retributive justice, but with a terrifying twist. The punishment didn't always stop with the person who committed the crime. For instance, if an engineer built a house that collapsed and killed the owner's son, it was the engineer's own son who would be executed. Justice was all about literally balancing the scales, even if it meant an innocent person had to die.
As societies grew and changed, so did their ideas of right and wrong, and a huge part of that was, of course, religion. The great monotheistic faiths all had to wrestle with the death penalty, writing it into divine law, but also, interestingly, planting the seeds for future debate.
And if you look at this, you can see this incredible evolution. Early Judaism, for example, made capital punishment mandatory for a whole host of offenses, from murder all the way to just cursing your parents, all for the sake of public deterrence. Christianity historically went along with this, but has seen a massive shift over time, with the Catholic Church now calling it inadmissible. And in Islam, there's this fascinating element where the victim's family often gets a choice. They can demand execution, accept money, or simply offer forgiveness, a mechanism meant to preserve life in the community. So just as the reasons for execution evolved, so did the methods. And for most of history, the goal was absolutely not a quick and painless death. Oh no. It was the exact opposite. It was all about creating a horrifying public spectacle. I mean, these methods were designed for maximum suffering. Impalement was a brutal warning to rebels. Crucifixion was a slow, agonizing death that everyone could see. In Rome, they even threw prisoners to lions as a form of public entertainment. These weren't just punishments. They were terrifying displays of state power, designed to scare everyone else into submission. But as we move into the modern era, the public stomach for these gruesome shows started to fade. A new idea started to take hold: the humane execution. And you'd think the reason for this shift would be, mercy. But nope, it came from a corporate feud. Back in the late 1880s, you had this massive rivalry between Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla over what kind of electricity would power the world. Edison was desperate to prove his direct current, DC, was better and safer than Tesla's alternating current, AC. So he goes to this committee that's looking for a new execution method and pitches them this idea. He basically tells them, hey, AC is so dangerous, so deadly, it's the perfect way to kill someone quickly and humanely. His real goal, though, he wanted to forever link his rival's technology with death in everyone's mind.
So what did we get? The electric chair. And its debut? Wow, it was an absolute catastrophe. The first guy, William Kemmler, was zapped with 1,000 volts, and he survived it. He was still alive, groaning. In a total panic, they hit him again, this time with double the voltage, and basically cooked him to death while horrified people watched. So much for a humane death.
Decades later, another method comes along, proposed as the ultimate humane solution: lethal injection. On paper, it sounds almost clinical, right? A simple 3-step medical procedure. An anesthetic to make you unconscious, a paralytic to stop your breathing, and then potassium chloride to stop the heart. It's supposed to be peaceful. But in reality, it's also led to some truly horrific botched executions, like Clayton Lockett, who writhed and gasped on the gurney for 43 agonizing minutes before he finally died.
These botched executions have really added fuel to the fire in the modern debate. But let's set aside the moral and ethical questions for just a second and ask a really practical one. Does the death penalty actually work? I mean, does it deter crime?
In the United States, we actually have this fascinating natural experiment going on. Right now, 23 states have completely abolished capital punishment. This basically allows researchers to compare them side by side with the states that still use it and see if there's any real difference in crime rates.
And what they've found, well, it's pretty eye-opening. A huge study in 2022 looked at 40 years of data and found no direct link. The homicide rates in states with the death penalty are not consistently lower than in states without it. In fact, as you can see here, the rates are often so close you can't tell them apart statistically.
So the takeaway from the study was pretty blunt. While executing someone obviously permanently stops that one person from ever committing another crime, there's just no evidence to suggest it stops other people. It doesn't seem to be the deterrent that its supporters have always claimed it is.
But beyond all the data and the history of these methods, there's another kind of punishment that happens. A hidden punishment, one that starts long before that final act.
Think about this for a second. In many places, the time between when someone is sentenced to death and when they're actually executed can be incredibly long. We're talking 15 years, sometimes even more. Living on death row means living in this permanent state of limbo, a psychological torment where people say it's like dying a little bit every single day.
The philosopher Albert Camus put it perfectly. He said the death penalty punishes someone twice. First, when the sentence is handed down, and that begins this long psychological ordeal. And a second time, when it's finally carried out. The punishment isn't just the execution itself, it's also the long, agonizing wait.
And that really leaves us with one final thought to chew on. From Hammurabi's code all the way to the electric chair, the history of execution is really the story of us trying to define justice in its most extreme form. But maybe, in the end, the ultimate punishment says less about the criminal who receives it and more about the society that decides it's necessary to deliver it.